Serving it up to you live on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I'm Bruce Nolan. That's Nate Geary, and this is Food for Thought, a show combining two of your three favorite F words. That's right, food and football. The third one is felines, because Nate had a cat hanging out in the background earlier, and we were deciding what exactly that cat sounds like. And we decided
Yes.
Well, sounds a little bit like this. Sounds like this.
Definitely cartoonish.
Yeah,
nature.
absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. I feel like every time I do the voice of a dog, it always ends up sounding like that viral video that went significantly around because it had the German Shepherd in it who sounded like they were in a situation where the dog was talking and the guy was talking back to him. That was weird. He was like, "Do you want to go over there? Yep. Do you want to do this? Yep.
Yep.
Things like that." I am being told
Yep.
I have an echo in my microphone. So, Nate, do me a favor. Just start talking, and I'm going to fiddle with it.
Oh, me. You want me to start talking? Or is it me that has the echo? It definitely could be me that has the echo, but hi, everyone. Hello. How are we? It says, hey, Karen says sounds good on her end, so maybe perhaps there's just a thing, Bruce. I don't know. Maybe it's just Juan's.
Maybe. Am I coming out of your speakers, I guess is the question. Or am I coming out of your headphones?
You're in my
because
headphones,
if I'm coming
baby.
out of your speakers...
You're in my headphones, baby. You're in my
Okay,
in my ears and in my heart.
You know what? I would be in your heart.
You would.
That would
You
make
are.
sense. You'll be in my heart. Yes, I'll do Phil Collins right here on Friday night. Phil Collins.
I'll get the. I'll keep the rhythm bass. Yeah.
A reminder that tonight's show and every show that we bring to you is brought to you by Genesee Brewing Company. Since 1878, Genesee has poured generations of brewing knowledge into each pint, can, and bottle of their beer. They make no sacrifices when it comes to their beer, brewing each with the highest quality ingredients for consistently great drinking experiences. Look for Genesee Beer, Genesee Light, Cream Ale, and their specialty line with beers like Ruby Red Kolsch and Oktoberfest. Genesee Brewery, Rochester, New York. Pineapple Kolsch is
Pineapple
the specialty
Kolsch.
line. And I still haven't had it. It's going to be out of style before I get it, Nate.
No, it'll never be out of style. And I told you about what the kids are doing, right?
No, what are the kids doing?
The kids are taking half the pineapple and half the ruby red and pouring it into a pint glass, half and half, and creating a tropical experience.
I would drink that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will probably. I'll try it if I have both in one setting. I have not had that yet, although they are upstairs. I do have one of each. I just have to put them in the fridge. So maybe I'll try that, and we'll do that next week live. I mean, we might as well.
Might as well. I mean, it's better than the eggnog at this point. I have to ask,
R.I.P.
Did the eggnog make the trip? No! How did
didn't.
we not lead the show with this? The eggnog is no
Yeah,
more.
I kind of wanted to forget. It's been a lot of long nights, sleepless nights, no eggnog. It was one of those decisions that you make as like a middle-aged, started to become, well, middle-aged is dramatic. I'm not middle-aged. I'm 30. I mean, I would say more like, if like 45 is probably middle-aged, I would say I am still of a young man. But regardless, the biggest, oops, hold on. Can you hear me, Bruce?
Yeah.
Am I still on? Oh,
I can hear you.
Sorry. I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
The biggest is what you started saying.
Oh, and then I thought I just dropped out, and then I forgot what I just said.
You didn't.
Now we're off to a dashing start.
You need to apologize to Karen, first off, because she
Oh,
said...
eggnog. God, that's what we were
missed the
talking about,
eggnog.
the eggnog. Yes. So it was just, I had to make one of those decisions as a man, as a 30-something-year-old man, like, do I bring the almost year-old eggnog with me in my move with the opportunity that it could potentially puncture, or what if it opens, and I'm in the process of moving and it's in a box that's important, or I try to bring it and at that point I started asking the question, if I am creating a special package to get this from the old place to the new place, maybe it's time to part ways with it. Like it was sort of like not very emotionally connected, but it kind of was at the same time. It was a living, breathing thing, literally. So it just was hard to put it down.
You know what? I feel like we missed a huge opportunity.
Could have had like a really
Massive-
professional send-off.
We could have had a funeral.
Yeah.
I would have brought a trumpet out. I could have played taps. The whole thing would have happened. I would have...
Content galore.
Just the whole thing. It would have been amazing. Speaking of amazing, Michael, thank you so much for the super chat, man. He says, finally watching live, guys. Love your show. I love the fact that we have a first-time live listener. Michael, do me a favor. Anybody out there, including Michael, who sends a super chat of $10 or more, make sure you send a message to @NateGearySports with your address and a screenshot of you doing the super chat and a screenshot of the fact that you're following at Genesee Brewery on Twitter, and he will send you a pint glass.
I will, and just be sure that you actually, I've got to open up my DMs again. That's actually a problem. Recently I had to close them. Dolphins fans, you don't want to keep it open. But I'll reopen my DMs, so Michael, you can shoot me a DM with that screenshot of you following Genesee Brewing Company, and just make sure you throw a screenshot. If you say you're Michael, I'll know who you are, and make sure we get you taken care of. Get your shipping information, and I owe another 2 out for another listener as well. I figured I like to do them in bulk, so I'll get these ones out at some point this week.
Nate dropped the ball like the Dolphins not drafting Herbert. You know what? I love it. I absolutely love
Liam.
it. It's never a bad time to take a shot at it.
Liam, love to hear it.
In the history of football, never a bad time to take a shot at the Dolphins. In fact, I don't know if you listened to the Bruce exclusive this week, but the Bruce exclusive this week was about traits giving you options. And specifically, I talked about it because of the discussion about Tua and arm strength that popped up.
Not a trait for you? Arm strength's not a trait for Tua?
He doesn't check the box for me when it comes to arm strength.
I would agree.
So we're going to talk about that later, and we're going to talk about the effusive, flowering praise that gets heaped on every single one of these quarterbacks.
The sensationalization of quarterbacks in this league. Yeah, we're going to get into that. I've got a big time bone to pick with Devontae Adams, with Tyreek Hill, with media. I'm going to rant later. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to hear the rant. But before we even get started, for those of you who are watching us live on YouTube, make sure that you make a note that Nate is in his new place this time.
New digs.
But also, the lighting is so good.
Superb.
It looks like he has a green screen.
It does. This is real, though.
It literally looks like he has a green screen of some other dude's man cave behind him. That's how good
soon to be man cave.
The lighting is.
Yes. Yeah,
soon to be a man cave.
But great lighting. It was actually why I picked the house that we picked. It was for this place.
You know what? It's just you giving of yourself and
thinking about the brand
for the brand and the group that we have as fans of Food for Thought. Foodies for thought, mind you, is what you would call these people.
Indeed, you would.
Food for thoughties, probably.
Food for thoughties, I would say.
Food for thoughties. So speaking of great pairings, like Nate and I, who are great pairings,
indeed,
we're going to talk about food pairings tonight. We're going to kick it off with a discussion about food pairings. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, food pairing, I specifically sent Nate a note. And when I sent him the note and text, I did a very typical Bruce thing, which is, okay, well, let's define the thing we're talking about. That's a very Bruce thing to say, okay, for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to define food pairings as foods that are much better together than they are separate. That doesn't mean they can't be good separate. It just means they are in their ideal form when they are together. And Mr. Geary, I will allow you, much like you and I, better together, will allow you to start off.
I love that. This one was actually harder than you'd think, because what you don't want to do is go generic with this, Bruce. This is not a generic podcast. So the last thing I want to do is say, like, oh, peanut butter and jelly, because that's just absurd and that's low-lying fruit, and we're better than that here on this podcast. You stick around on a Friday night not for peanut butter and jelly references, right? But I also didn't want to get off too far on the beaten path. Something that I know people eat, something I know I eat a lot. These two things together are patently better, but I think on their own, they're very... It's weird that they both are slightly flavorless. I mean, there's flavor to them, but when you add them together, that both flavors sort of come out. And Bruce, it's tomato and mozzarella, like fresh tomato, cut up cherry tomato, fresh mozzarella or burrata, which is my personal favorite. together they just are so much better. And you throw a little red onion in there. We do a lot of the balsamic glaze. Bruce, are you a balsamic glaze fan, and do you know about it?
I do know about it. Not a huge fan. Quite frankly, I'll just take a little bit of an oil-based dressing, just a little bit of like an Italian, a little bit of like a peppercorn on there, and I'll be good. And I'll be good with that. There's nothing wrong with balsamic. I'm not like anti it. I just always manage to choose something different.
So the thing I like about the balsamic glaze, right, is it's a little tube. You don't have to put a lot on. I like to put a little on my pizza. It's a little thicker. It's not like vinegar, like the balsamic vinegar, where it's like watery. It's like a nice thick glaze, and it goes great with just about everything, but particularly tomato, mozzarella, preferably burrata, fresh burrata, right? And by the way, are you a fresh burrata guy? Where do you stand on cheeses? Because I know you're a cheese guy.
Yes, I am a cheese guy. I'm down with burrata. Absolutely, okay. I'm down for it. Yes, absolutely.
We seek it out. So like if it's on the menu, we go out and it's like, yeah, they got burrata. What's with it? And I'm a big fan of pairing beets with it. She did it the other night. It was fantastic.
Really?
Roasted
so my wife
beets.
told me out of the blue not too long ago, you know what I've been craving? And of course, it's like the most general question in the world. I can literally answer.
Right.
She goes, you know what I've been craving? I'm like, I don't know. She said, beets. And I immediately busted out, of course, every single one of my Dwight impressions from The Office.
Bears.
And beets.
Have you tried golden beets?
No.
So that's really where the game changes for you on a beet. You should get one regular beet and then one golden beet, and then cut them up, slice them up, roast them, and then throw them together in kind of like a, I would say a mix like around with the burrata and a little bit of balsamic glaze, maybe some tomatoes. Like that's home run city, dude. Yes, home run city.
Okay, I'll make a note. Golden beets.
Golden beets.
For me, the food pairing I decided to use was tomato soup and grilled cheese.
Okay, so you went even more basic than me, so I feel vindicated. But we kept it simple. We kept it middle America.
I didn't want to go crazy because let me just be honest. We have other Bill's roster room discussions that are food related coming later, and I went completely off the deep end.
So did I.
So I tried to keep this one a little bit grounded, and I went with
a
piece of tomato soup.
You wanted to stay in this planet. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
I've had grilled cheese without tomato soup. It's fine. I have very rarely had tomato soup without grilled cheese. I will tell you that. Very rarely have I been like, you know what I want? Tomato soup. My wife would be like, same. Grilled cheese? Nah, just tomato soup. She would look at me like I had three heads. She'd be like, what do you mean you're going to have tomato soup without grilled cheese? So to me, tomato soup, grilled cheese, they're perfectly reasonable apart. I especially like the versatility of grilled cheese. You can do all sorts of different cheeses. You can throw any meats you want in there. It becomes a melt at that point, so we can make an argument either whether or not it's a grilled cheese. I would make an argument it's not really a grilled cheese. Once you add meat to it, it now becomes a melt. That's a whole different story. But
right.
The point being that you can have both of them independently, and they're both fine, but they're ideal together. And I found that when you have a food that is supposed to be dipped, like it's transitionally dipped, right? That's the way it works. You eat it, you take a bite, you dip it, you double dip, you triple dip, you quadruple dip, you quintuple dip, everything like that. It's almost like French dip and au jus. That a little bit. You can't function without the other one. And so that's the reason why I went grilled cheese and tomato soup.
So I've got two things to ask you. We have no guests tonight, so we can go in a little deeper on some of these conversations tonight than we normally do with keeping that 20 minutes for our guest. And Bruce, I've got to ask you two things. Your grilled cheese. What is your ideal bread, and what's your ideal cheese?
So I like to mix my cheeses with grilled cheese.
Okay.
I think you need something that melts really well, and I think you need
oil-based
that has yes. You butter the outside, obviously, of the bread.
Yep.
I really like a big hearty multigrain. I need it to hold up. I need it to hold up. I don't want any of that
multigrain.
I don't want any of that bread where the bread itself, like if you can give me a good like brioche or a good like Texas toast, I'm good with that too. The point is that I need to hold up. You give
Texas
me some
toast.
flimsy white American bread, right? Just flimsy. By the time you're done with it, it's literally just going to be you're holding just melty cheese. That's it.
Yeah.
You're just holding it. And it just,
which is not always the worst thing. It's not. I agree. But I agree.
It's just not ideal. So for me, It's about getting the right type of bread, which is, again, it'd be hearty. It's got to hold up. And when it comes to cheese, I know that this is absolutely blasphemous. Give me some straight yellow American, right?
Gotta be.
But
Gotta
also
be.
the sharpest possible white cheddar. The
Interesting.
sharper, the better. Now, I know that there's some cheese that melt a little bit better. Havarti is really good for this. Havarti
Yes, it
is
is.
very good. People like
Huge
brie
Havarti
here.
fan, though.
But
I like
literally
brie.
Give me the sharpest possible white cheddar, and I'm good to go.
So I like you, I'm not a multigrain guy, but you know what? My favorite one is rye bread, especially like a nice thick. They've got, I think it's like the Jewish rye that you can go get at like Wegmans, which we have around here, Bruce, and like you get like a nice piece of thick, almost Texas toast thick rye bread, and then I just throw like 4 or 5 pieces of American cheese, standard yellow American. That's really the only thing I want in my grilled cheese. And I'm really not a big tomato soup guy, and here's the reason why. Heartburn. Just, it tears me up whenever I have tomato soup. So I'm just not a huge tomato soup guy. So I do eat grilled cheese alone, and I have eaten grilled cheese alone, without tomato soup pairing. Now, like marinara, I would almost rather have marinara. Both give me heartburn, but I'll have less of the marinara, if that makes sense. So I still do want to dip something. There is that inherent want to dip that grilled cheese, regardless of the bread, regardless of the cheese.
You do realize that you picked cheese and tomato as yours, and I picked cheese and tomato as mine when it comes to pairings.
Oh, wow, we did.
Yeah.
Just in different forms.
Just in different forms. You picked cheese and tomato, and I picked grilled cheese and tomato soup.
Oh my gosh. So just like the metaphor, things that are better together, we were already on the, we were preparing in the same wavelength.
It is literally a metaphor. It's a meta squared 4 is what it is. Completely off the deep end. We're 10 minutes in. We're already done. All right, moving along.
Back in action.
Nate and I are going to do Bill's roster room previews. But as is per usual with this show, we are going to do roster room previews for the 2022 version of our Buffalo Bills a little differently. We're going to compare them to food. So we're going to make sure that we tackle the different roster rooms of the Buffalo Bills over the next couple of weeks in food form. And we're going to start
roster. This is the most exciting one. The most exciting thing for us getting into the season, Bruce. And I'm glad we sort of saved the best for the last. These are the dog days of summer, Bruce. This is the stuff that you start to get bored. You're like, where's football? Where's football? We're so close. OTAs, mini camp, mandatory. We're so close to that training camp. But now in these position room food comparisons, this is going to be the best. The next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be the best shows we've ever put out by far.
And we're going to start with if the Bills quarterback room was a food. And I'm going to start on this one because we're going to go ahead and compare the Bills quarterback room to a food. And here we go. The Bills quarterback room is really, really, really good chili that you have as an appetizer. And I will tell you why. Sometimes you'll go to a restaurant and you'll think, I really want a bowl of chili, but I don't think I want it as my meal. So what you'll do is you'll order the good chili, and they have good chili. You've been there before. You're a fan. But you're going to have it as an appetizer. Here's the problem with having really good chili as an appetizer. No matter how good the meal is, you're going to be thinking about that chili.
Yeah.
You're going to be feeling about that chili. You kind of started off right at the top of your meal with a pretty good food. And no matter how reasonable, you get done with your duck or you get done with your sandwich and you go, and you slowly dab your mouth with your napkin and go, well, that was reasonable. I think that was delightful. I think it was perfectly satisfactory, you say. But it didn't satisfy your primal instincts, like scarfing down a gigantic bowl of chili right at the top of your meal. Just like no matter how reasonable you might feel Case Keenum is, and you're happy that you can have a nice, reasonable backup quarterback, no matter how reasonable he may be, it's not going to satisfy the urge like watching Josh Allen jump over a linebacker. It's not going to fill you with that absolute manliness that you feel from watching a gigantic 6'4", 245-pound man jump over people and throw the ball 1,000,000 yards. There's something about that whatever the next course cannot possibly replicate. In addition, chili, there's a lot of stuff in chili. There's a lot to chili. People just put the entire kitchen sink in their chili. You might say they put every single trait they have in their fridge in their chili. Much like Josh Allen, just a collection, just a bundle of all the traits, right? Tall and big and strong. He's got a big arm and he's athletic. And God was just sitting there and said, I'm going to throw all the traits into Josh Allen. I'm just going to put all of them. Oh, by the way, we're going to make him handsome and likable too. Just throw it out there, right? So in all of these ways, the Bills quarterback room is like having a really good bowl of chili, but having it as an appetizer.
It's a good one, Bruce. I like that you phased in your argument just about like the chili is also the timing of when the dish happens, right? Emphasizing that it's that first encore, right? Or it's the first dish that you have, the first course, right? I like that. That was very nuanced and layered, Bruce, much like your chilies, I'm sure. Very layered, very nuanced. Lots of spices, I'm sure. For me, Bruce, the Bills quarterback room, for me, and I wanted to look at it from a league perspective. So this isn't just the Bills quarterback room, but it's how they stack up with the rest of the league, right? I mean, that's kind of how you want to view these position groups. You want to look at them and you want to say, let's compare this to that. And like a lot of quarterback rooms, most are meh. If you have a starter, you probably don't have a lot of depth. So for me, this quarterback room is a lot like homemade pasta. Perfectly made, fresh pasta. You take from cut and roll to right in the water, 1, 2, 3 minutes, pull it out. You've got some of the tastiest pasta in the world, right? Like for me, and the comparison of this Bills quarterback room, which I believe, Bruce, is, in terms of you feel, to your point, the drop off between Josh Allen and Case Keenum is significant. But I think if you looked across the league, there's not that big of a drop-off in a lot of cases from some of the teams that are deeper from their starting quarterback because they're not as good as Josh Allen and their backup quarterback. But I think for me, it's like the difference between homemade pasta, like the Bills room, and standard box pasta. You're going to have spaghetti, right? Most people are just going to make it with box pasta because they're lazy. They don't want to put the time. They don't want to put the effort in. They don't want to spend the assets to make sure you have an insurance policy like the Bills do. They have 3 players, Bruce, that have started NFL games, that have played and thrown NFL touchdowns against NFL defenses. That is, I think, a huge advantage. Now, insurance is as good as you're going to make it, right? And if you want to spend the time, Bruce, if you want to spend the assets, the energy into making sure you have the best possible pasta, you're going to make it yourself. You're going to roll it out. It's really, Bruce, not that hard. It's not a lot of ingredients. It's just a lot of, you have to know how to do it, how to cut it right. You have to have the right equipment, of course. But I think at the end of the day, Bruce, it's better to be the homemade pasta in this instance. If Josh Allen misses 3, 4, 5 games in the course of a season, you feel like you have 2 guys that you can lean on rather than, going to the box pasta when maybe you don't know what you're going to get. And the quality is certainly not the same.
That's good. I like that one. I'm a fan.
I really wanted to figure out the homemade pasta angle on this. And, I think it's funny. We've been, dabbling in some different types of pastas, right, that aren't flour-based. Because, when we're eating pasta, the big thing is you're eating a whole giant bowl of carbs, right? So, we've been looking at some alternative pastas, right? Like there's, soy and a couple of other, zucchini noodles, right? And all these different vegetable noodles.
Have we talked about chickpea pasta yet?
I've had chickpea pasta. It's fine.
I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm
whatever.
all the way in on Bonza pasta.
But kind of what I was getting though is at the end of the day, I still always want to go with that flour route, right? And most teams in the NFL, they understand the value of having an insurance policy. But most teams, you don't have a lot of true quarterback competitions anymore in the NFL, right? You have, and is Atlanta? Is that maybe Atlanta and maybe Seattle right now are the 2 teams that really have Carolina. Yep, I would agree with that. Carolina, absolutely. Like those are the true quarterback competitions, and the drop off between starter and backup are not that different. Pittsburgh's another one, right? I don't think the separation between those guys are that different, like they are here in Buffalo. But that's actually a good thing, Like you don't want to have a backup that you're spending all sorts of money on to back up for Josh Allen in case of emergency. But I think you have a very capable guy in Case Keenum who has that rapport with Stephon Diggs, right? Like he knows how to get the best out of Stephon Diggs, and I think if you had to put him in for a 3, 4, 5 game stretch, you're feeling much better than you would if you just have Matt Barkley, who I think is also capable and can come in and win you football games and be a manager. I mean, he's proven that already over the course of his career. So I think they're just in a unique position of being, I think, by far the deepest in terms of skill, but I think experience. And capability in the league and knowing an NFL offense. And a lot of teams do not have that luxury across the league, Bruce. They just don't. There's not, I think there's an offensive line problem in the NFL. There's not enough good ones. There's also not 32 starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL, meaning there's a lot of guys that are in the middle, and that middle has a drop-off point. And that middle part is also not deep, Bruce. So it's to see the Bills have one, I think, if you were to rank backup quarterbacks, Bruce, where does Case Keenum jump for you? Like 3, 4, 5? Probably in that range, right?
Yeah, he's a perfectly reasonable backup quarterback. I mean, you're looking at, I mean, depends. Do you think Baker Mayfield's a backup quarterback right now? Does he count? You know what I mean? So I
wouldn't count him.
So yeah, I would put him up there. I mean, obviously Teddy Bridgewater, I put really, really, really high. And
yep.
Ironically enough, he's in Miami, which is, the subject of discussions.
Indeed.
But the old adage is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. But thankfully, we have quarterbacks, multiples. And we have one who's clearly head and shoulders above the other, so we don't have to worry about that problem. But
indeed,
they also have people to throw to. And the food simile for this week in the preview for the Bills' current wide receiver group is the Bills' current wide receiver group makes me feel like. Nate, you get to lead off with the food simile.
Yes, can't wait. So the Bills wide receiver room makes me feel like I'm at the original Pancake House and I get the Dutch apple, right? Like, do you know what I'm talking about, Bruce? The big Dutch apple. When it comes out of it's in the skillet, it comes out, and when it comes out, it's domed, right? And the thing that I love about the Dutch apple is when it deflates, right? And when it comes down in the middle, sometimes it's undercooked and it's actually not a great experience. But when it's perfectly cooked and it comes together, it's nice and light and fluffy in the middle with all of that apple and all of that like apple cinnamony sugary stuff. Like this Bills, when I was thinking about this food simile, Bruce, it actually created a little anxiety because outside of Diggs and Davis at the top, right? And I'm thinking about Diggs and Davis. That's when that Dutch apple pie comes out of the oven, and it's got this big old dome in the middle. But then when you kind of want to pop it and start eating it, or it starts to collapse in on itself. Right now, we're at the point where we don't know when we cut in what it's going to be. I mean, is Jamison Crowder going to come in and all of a sudden be the guy that I think a lot of people thought he'd be in the Jets offense over the last couple of years? Or is it going to be undercooked, Bruce? And, Crowder can't stay healthy like he has been the last couple of years, and he doesn't give you that. And Khalil isn't ready. Khalil Shakur isn't ready to step into that full-time number 3 slot receiver role, right? Or Gabe Davis goes down, and now you're relying on Jay Kumaro as your primary outside receiver on the other side of Stephon Diggs. So we're at the point, Bruce, where in this receiver room, and what it makes me feel like is we're right there at that point where we're about to cut into that apple, that big Dutch apple pie pancake, whatever you want to call it, and we're about to find out if it's perfectly cooked or if it's undercooked. We're not going to find out for a little while.
Wow. We really go off the rails when it comes to these food metaphors, don't we? Just completely off the rails. Before too long, I'll be like, okay, so there was this thing that was a big thing at McDonald's in 1972. And in 1972, there was an advertisement on television. And there was this actor that was part of that advertisement. Well, he grew up to play this guy on this sitcom that only ran for one season before it got canceled. Okay, and this one guy had this catchphrase that he used. Eventually, that's where we're going to be headed. But for now, I'm going to go slightly less complicated than that, but I'm still going to go with something a little crazy. And the food simile for me is that the current Bills wide receiver group makes me feel like I own a Panera that doesn't have a drive-thru. The reason why it makes me feel like I own a Panera that doesn't have a drive-thru is I feel really good about my restaurant. I like my restaurant. I feel like Paneras are stable. I feel like they have a stable clientele. They offer a wide variety of foods. I feel like people generally feel good about Panera. When you talk about Panera, there's not a lot of people who go, "Eeh, I hate Panera." Now, you might not get people who love it, but
Sure.
I have never met a person who really hates Panera, just refuses to eat at Panera. And part of running a successful business isn't just getting super fans. It's also avoiding people who will spread negativity about your food. So there's nobody who's going to look at the current Bills wide receiver group and go, "Yee." Nobody. Literally nobody is going to do that. Now, they might not ever think that it's a top 3 group, but they're going to never think it's bad. And part of making sure that you run a successful business is making sure that you can avoid or curb negative feedback. However, you know what would really take this offense to the next level? Do you would really take my Panera to the next level? If I had a little something else on the outside, like a drive-through. And so I don't know about you, but where I come from, we have Paneras that occasionally will have drive-throughs. And I personally will not go to Paneras that don't have drive-throughs anymore because I'm lazy and I want to avoid human beings. It's mostly the second one. If I have to talk face-to-face to a human being, my level of inclination for doing whatever that activity is immediately went down. I want to get my groceries picked up, right? I want to go through drive-thrus.
Get your Panera.
I want to have things sent to my house.
Yeah.
I want to avoid having a conversation with a human being as often as humanly possible. And so the Buffalo Bills wide receiver group is good. In fact, nobody out there would look at it and complain. No one is having the conversations about the Buffalo Bills wide receiver group that we are having about the Chicago Bears wide receiver group. Nobody. Nobody has ever even said close to that. In fact, the second the Buffalo Bills went out and invested in John Brown and Cole Beasley, they still, from that time on, did not say that because they were like, okay, they're doing what they can to help Josh Allen. Then they went out and got Stephon Diggs the next year. They go, okay, they're clearly doing what they need to do to help Josh Allen. And after the way Gabriel Davis performed in the playoffs, nobody is looking at that going, hey, I don't really know if Gabe Davis is ready to take the next step because it's all just kind of assumed that he's going to. Plus, they added O.J. Howard. They added Jamison Crowder. So nobody's thinking negatively of it. But I would feel a little bit better if I had something else on the outside. On the outside of my Panera, like a drive-through. What do you think of that? What do you think of that food simile?
I like the drive-through, and immediately I thought of Julio Jones because he feels like a drive-through. But yeah, Bruce, it's funny because I think my main argument for when anyone says, well, what about the receivers? And there's not everyone. I mean, Bruce, that there aren't. Everyone doesn't think that the room is a weak point. I'm not saying that at all, but I do think there's a lot to learn about what this room can bring, what it looks like together, how the personnel package is, and I think. I know they've been saying it on the morning show. I know Howard has been saying this a lot, but thinking of them more as like a group of pass catchers. Sales talk about this, right? A group of pass catchers. So you include Dawson Knox, you include, James Cook, who they got in the draft this year in the second round out of Georgia. You talk about how McKenzie and potentially Tavon Austin fit into this whole equation, and it's interesting to think about. It's kind of in the same concept, except they still have Stephon Diggs. That the Kansas City Chiefs, this evolution that they're going through, Bruce, right, where they've gone from, okay, well, everything is built around what happens and how the defense defends Tyreek Hill, and that changes now. And now they become, in theory, right, harder to defend because of the multiplicity of all of the different options that, A, Andy Reid has to design these schemes, but B, how Patrick Mahomes can execute those schemes. So I think for me, like, it's that's the most interesting part of this is when you think about the puzzle that this whole thing is. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of change on this offense, Bruce, more than I think maybe we have given it credit for this offseason. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about all of the change outside of the offensive coordinator, right? Like that gets a lot of the attention, the Dorsey from Brian Dable, Bruce, but there is a lot of new faces to integrate into the offense in different ways, not huge roles, Bruce, but those depth and those secondary roles that I think can sort of really round out an offense. And it's what makes an offense, I think the best offenses, so difficult to defend when you get on the field. And seeing what they're going to do with James Cook, and will they run 2 running backs out on the field at one time in certain packages? Start out looking like they're going to be, with a fullback and 2 tight ends, and then they split out to 5 wide. And they have the guys that can do that and create mismatches if you're going to defend them in run packages. So, Bruce, there's a lot of questions that maybe we have not really gotten to thinking of or talking about because we've solely been fixated on the offensive coordinator change, which of course is a big change in itself. I just, fundamentally, this is going to be a different looking offense, and there are going to be several new faces, both on the offensive line and at the skill position player. The one constant, obviously, is Josh Allen.
Now, I have a really, really important question. Nate, do you have an in with the guy who runs the audio at the Bills games? Do you have an in there? Can I make a suggestion that might make it to him?
Sure.
If the Bills ever decide they're going to run Devin Singletary and James Cook at the same time in the backfield, can we get Pony by Genuine to play over the loudspeakers? Because it feels like that's a massive missed opportunity by every PA guy literally ever when the team runs 2 running backs, 2 halfbacks in the backfield.
I don't know the reference, Bruce.
What? Seriously?
I don't know the reference.
Oh no! Oh, see, I'm so old. Okay, so I'm dating myself a little bit here. So,
well, now we know. And Karen wants to know, what if the FBI is working at the drive-thru?
Well, I'm going to give them a little hint right here. I am going to give them a little hint to my identity, and that is that when I was younger, when you ran 2 halfbacks in the same backfield, they called that a pony backfield. That was the term for that. You call it a pony. And so, of course, the song Pony by Genuine, which is a very popular song amongst dancers, could be played in the background when there was a pony backfield.
What year would this... Hold on. I do have Google at my fingertips. I could...
Yeah, I feel like you could absolutely do that. You could just Google it. I don't think it's super old.
1996. I was 5 at the time.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think I would have known that one, Bruce. But it's okay. You were like 8 at the time, right?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, no, I could tell by your reaction it was only 1 or 2 years difference.
I'm clearly basically I might even be younger than you. This could be just a gigantic long con.
You would be a Gen Zer this whole time.
Yes, everything you know about me indicates Gen Z. I'm on TikTok, you just don't know it.
Yeah, it's under the exclusive. That's why.
That's right. It's just
the exclusive.
It's be exclusive.
Be exclusive. Yes.
On TikTok. Yes, absolutely. We need to make that happen. So we are going to bust out the mailbag. If you have questions for us and want to drop us a line, now would be the time in the comment section. But I have a email that was sent in to Food for Thought from Jeremy Gugino, and he said, Bruce, I have lived in Boise for 16 years. My house is literally a mile from Boise State football stadium. However, I know nothing about Boise State football. I seriously couldn't pick the head coach out of a lineup. With that in mind, based upon your film study, do you think Khalil Shakir has the skill set to play on the outside at the NFL level? Like many in Bills Mafia, I'm a little concerned about our depth at boundary receiver. It's almost like he knew I was going to talk about Panera and the drive-thru on the outside. He says, P.S. I respect the hell out of you, but last week when you referred to Benny Goodman music as jazz, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. That's like calling the Jonas Brothers hip-hop. Come on, you're better than that, Bruce. Ha, he says. Okay, first off, I will defend myself. I recognize that Benny Goodman is the king of swing. Okay, I totally get that. But he is a jazz clarinetist. Like, that is what he is. Now, I understand that he's known as the king of swing. I get that. But as a clarinetist, he is a jazz clarinetist. So I defend that to the death. I will continue to say that Benny Goodman is a jazz clarinetist. That's what he is. I understand the rest of it, but I'm going with it. I'm absolutely going with it. Okay, so let's go to the answers for that
Khalil
one.
Shakir.
Khalil Shakir. Nate, I'll let you take this one. Can Khalil Shakir play on the outside?
He's probably gonna try. I think, where I see him starting the year is in a primary special teams role, and kind of what he plays is probably not a guy that comes in as a primary boundary replacement when Diggs or when Davis comes off the field. But in talking a little bit about the conversation we were having about the positionless player, right? Like, I do think that you could see a lot of Dawson Knox lining up in the X position. I think you could see him lining up on the outside, right? And I think if that's the case, Bruce, then you probably will see a little bit more of Jake Kumaro as well, as a guy that is really their only depth, a true depth at primary outside receiver. I think the same questions you might have about Isaiah Hodgins for different reasons. He's more of a big nickel. He's got the body type that you look for in an outside receiver, and maybe that's why you're looking at a Khalil Shakir and saying, well, it's not the ideal outside boundary receiver body. He's not a Julio Jones. He's not 6'4", 230 and change. That's not what we're looking at. He's not DK Metcalf, right? But neither is Stephon Diggs, right? And neither is, I think Gabriel Davis is your traditional boundary receiver, but I really liked in the playoffs last year, Bruce, when they were able to move him in the slot and get him matched up against slot corners in that Kansas City defense. I thought that was a really big advantage for the Bills in that second half, and one of the things that sparked their comeback in that game was moving him into the slot, and that's where he was winning a lot in that game. So the question is whether or not, isn't whether or not guys can move in and bump in and play the inside. The question is, if you want Diggs on the inside, if you want Gabriel Davis on the inside, who can be on the field that can play that boundary receiver? Because I don't really think that's Jamison Crowder, right? I think he's more of that Cole Beasley style, more Cole Beasley type with better yards after catch potential than Cole Beasley. So I could see him having all the same route responsibilities in this offense that Cole Beasley had, with a little bit more yards after catch upside. But like when you look around, can Shakir be the guy who has projected more as an interior, as a slot receiver in the NFL, and a special teams guy that can return kicks? The questions remain, does he have the body type? Does he have the type of route running package walking into the league to play outside receiver? And, I mean, he didn't do it a ton in college, but there's film out there if you want to go see it. If you want to make a point, you can find videos on YouTube and showing him getting reps at the outside receiver and winning at the college level. But I think for me in the NFL, he probably projects as that inside guy, and we'll see how he ultimately gets used. But, and maybe I heard One Bills Live talking about him getting that more of like that Deebo Samuel role, like the sort of the X Factor role. Like, is this a guy that's going to be in motion? But I think that, is he going to take handoffs? Could he be a screen guy? Like, those are things that I think they might try to use him with. But boundary receiver, I don't think right away. I think that if that is the plan, Bruce, that's certainly going to be a work in progress, if anything else.
When I think about a boundary receiver, I think about the traits necessary to be able to succeed in that role. And the first and most important thing that I look for when I'm trying to answer the question, can this guy play on the outside in an NFL offense, is release package. That is the absolute first thing I want to see. Is, can this person clear contact at the line of scrimmage, playoff press? You look at players that we were anticipating to be meaningful players at the next level, players like James Hardy, for example, who just could not get off press coverage, right? Just couldn't do it. A lot of players end up in the slot because of necessity, not necessarily
That's right.
because they're better with left and right equally breaking routes. That's not the case. It's because they can't play on the line of scrimmage on the boundary. So the first thing I look for is, can this guy clear hands at the line of scrimmage? Or is he just going to get hung up? Is it going to take him 2.5 seconds to get into his route? Because if that's the case, sorry. That's it. Release package is such a big deal that we just don't talk about. And we should talk about it a lot when it comes to getting wide receivers to develop in the NFL. We look at players like Jamar Chase, and you go, okay, why was he able to have such success as a rookie? He came in with an NFL-ready release package. Players like Garrett Wilson, players like Chris Olave, a lot of players who played in the SEC and the Big Ten, and they had to deal with press coverage. These are players who had to learn to clear contact early. Khalil Shakir can do it a little bit. He can do it a little bit. Okay, now let's look at the next trait when it comes to playing on the outside. Can you stack a receiver, right? Because if you can't at least threaten to win vertically, they're just going to sit on everything.
That's right.
So you have to have two main components to be able to succeed on the outside. The first is you got to be able to clear contact. You have to be able to clear press coverage. Release package has to be in place. And the second is you have to be able to stack corners. And if you don't have the wheels to be able to stack corners, a lot of those, well, he's not very big and he's not very fast. A lot of those people end up on the inside because they can't win anywhere else. Not necessarily because they're the absolute ideal version of themselves inside, even though that's true. It's because they can't win otherwise. They
Right.
need the free release. So I think Shakir is better suited as a slot player. I don't
Agreed.
think it's a hard fast. Shakir did play on the outside in college.
And he won't get pigeonholed. He'll get the opportunity to try it.
He'll get the opportunity to try. I don't think
Right.
that this staff is going to walk in and say, "I'm sorry, you're just a slot player," because let's be honest, if you can have him and Jamison Crowder on the field at the same time, you would prefer that as opposed to the other options. Just traits give you options, right? And options are good. So I think he's preferable as a slot, but I don't think it's impossible he could ever play on the outside. Very similar to players like Emmanuel Sanders.
Absolutely.
Who was absolutely a smaller player, right? But he had release package. I think that as
Could
he got
play
older,
inside,
he
could play
a lot
outside.
more, play inside, play outside, have that versatility. But Shakir has the speed to be able to do it, and I think that the release package can be developed to the point where he could do it as well. So I don't think it's a natural one-to-one fit, but I think it's something he could do. Liam in the comment section says, would you describe the state of the interior offensive line as tenuous or stable? Nate, tenuous or stable for the Bills' interior offensive line?
Stable. And I think it's because of the depth. They're going to have Ike Butker coming back from injury. The versatility, right? Ryan Bates, if Saffold goes down, he can hop over. If they got to move Cody Ford in and bring him on the right side, they have the ability to do that. They still have Cody Ford, and I know a lot of people have given up and moved on from Cody Ford, but in terms of a depth interior offensive piece, you're not going to find a lot of second round talent. And listen, he is that. He is a good to medium good run blocker. It's in the pass sets that really hurt him. He does not have the foot speed to keep up on those. He can handle himself on a bull rush, but when it gets past him and the defender crosses his face, he really struggles with footwork to be able to recover, and that's why he has not been a starting caliber offensive lineman. But he can play, he can fill in. So I think from a depth perspective, you'll like where the Bills are in case a guy goes down. And the same can be said if a guy like, and we'll include Mitchell Morse in this, if Mitch Morse goes down, you can bump Ryan Bates to center and move a Cody Ford in, and you still have stability there on that offensive line if in case of injury. And the same can be said, we'll see about the emergence on the outside with Tommy Doyle and how that works, and they bring in Quisenberry. So this is a team from the depth perspective is very good, but the stability part of it has to come, Bruce, from the level of play that you're going to get from the starters. And I'm interested to see what the first full year of Ryan Bates as a starter in this offense looks like. I'm interested to see what Aaron Cromer puts together in terms of a run concept and pass blocking sets and concepts. So I'm interested to see what that looks like early in camp. And obviously, Roger Saffold, he made the Pro Bowl last year, but I think if you talk to a lot of people that watched, he is definitely on the downside of his career. But can you get better play? Here will be the standard, Bruce. Can you get better play from Roger Saffold than you got from Darrell Williams? Because if you can, that's a net win, and I think the Bills can come out better than they were last year. I think they're slightly deeper in terms of experience and guys that can come in and have a slight drop-off, but not a monumental one, not a Bobby Hart level drop-off like they would have had at times last year on the outside, on the offensive line at the edge. So all in all, I would say stable is the word I'm using to describe. Now, how stable, I think, is a separate conversation, but I'm certainly not throwing it under the tenuous bus, that's for sure.
Yeah, if you forced me to use only these two adjectives to describe it, right? I'm only allowed. You know how much I hate being in a box, but
Yeah, you do. You hate that.
I absolutely hate it. But if you have to make me use one of these two adjectives, the adjective that is closest, it's a little bit like having those multiple choice questions where they ask you which one of these is the most true. You're like, what the heck? Most true? What do you? But yes, the most true adjective in this case for me would be stable. And for all the reasons that Nate said, I think that also I'm comparing it to interior offensive line situations across the league. I know that we don't do a very good job of that as fans to put things in perspective relative to other teams. But one of the things I'm always harping on, one of the things I hope Nate and I can get done in this show is we can have voices from other teams involved. Listen, I love to make food puns. Nate loves to make food puns. We love to make food metaphors. It's a huge part of the way we communicate things because we want to make sure we're saying the same thing that everyone else is saying in different ways, because other people are talking about the quarterback room too, guys. Everyone else is talking about the wide receiver room too. But sometimes if you put it in weird scenarios, then it lands. If metaphors make things land for people, and it may helps you look at things in a different way. So there's a reason why we talk about that. The other reason why we have people like Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns was supposed to be the guest for this week. We're going to try and get him on at some point here soon. But it's a Browns reporter, because you're going to be knee deep, neck deep, fully submerged, whatever the situation is. In Bills stuff, sometimes we don't peek our head out. And so when I look at the Bills' interior offensive line, I am looking at it relative to other interior offensive line situations around the league. And if you make me compare it to them, I'm going to use stable more often than I'm going to use tenuous.
Absolutely. And again, I said earlier, like, the league has a quarterback problem. There's not a lot of depth. There's not a lot of elite level players. There's not a lot of mid-level players. There's a lot of parity. So I think for me, when you think about the parity in the league at quarterback, the Bills could be in much worse position both at the quarterback and offensive line position. They're hard to find offensive linemen, and I think if the Bills have anything, they have guys they can rely on to. Again, and I'll say this about the quarterback room and the interior and the offensive line room in general, across the board. Guys that have started football games, guys that have played meaningful snaps. And when you get into October, November, December, and injuries pop up and guys are missing games, the Bills have guys they can turn to that have started in the NFL, both at tackle with Quisenberry, who came in free agency, and at guard, if you want to bump in Cody Ford. And I think that's a huge advantage for a team, and not every team can say that they've got guys that have experience in the NFL. They can walk in the system too, by the way, which I think is also important. Again, and Ike Botker's a name as well that I didn't even mention in those other two. I think they've got a lot of flexibility and stability on that interior, just from the depth and the guys that can move around if they have to.
A reminder that today's show and every show is brought to you by Genesee Brewing Company. Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns was going to be on the Genesee Hotline, because every week it's brought to you by, you guessed it, Genesee Brewing Company. Look for Pineapple Kolsch in stores and at bars and restaurants today. Genesee beer brewed for generations. In lieu of winners and losers this week, Nate and I have something we want to talk about. And it's fitting, I think, that just recently Tua Tagovailoa came up in the news, not just for his arm strength, but also because Tyreek Hill said, according to Tyreek Hill and his agent on a podcast that Drew Rosenhaus was just on, that Tua is more accurate than Patrick Mahomes. He said that. That's an actual thing that he said. Devontae Adams recently came out and said that when it comes to skill level, there really isn't a lot of difference between Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know, Nate, that we exist in fluff moments.
Yes, we do.
Now. Like, this is fluff season. We're all in fluff season because it's spring practices. Everybody is in the best shape of their lives. Every player is ready for eternal optimism. Every player who you thought was going to break out last year on your Dynasty Fantasy Football team, don't worry, they're going to break out this year because all the fluff pieces are happening. But, Nate, I feel like you might have something to say when it comes to the fluff that gets thrown around. We might as well just call it Fluffernutter season. And I love a good Fluffernutter.
Me too.
Get some marshmallow, some peanut butter, put it on a panini, get a press. It's amazing. Put some banana on there.
Ooh, banana.
I'm all
for
about
sure.
it. All about it. But it feels like it's gone overboard this year, Nate. What do you have to say about that?
This year more than any. I just cannot remember a time where I had to hear all of this. This is looks good in short season, right? Oh, a lot of great throws today when there was no contact and on 7-on-7. And, Zach Wilson goes 7 for 8, or Zach Wilson goes 1 for 7 in 7-on-7s. And everyone says, oh no, is the quarterback going to struggle with accuracy issues? He was the worst quarterback in terms. So you get all these narratives that they start to run with based on performances with quarterbacks and teams that are installing new systems, right? And if you're if you're the Raiders, you're installing a new system and you just brought one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the league, that you're integrating with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, who are already really great pass catchers. So the whole Tua conversation and now the Derek Carr conversation, listen, Derek Carr is a fine quarterback, but come on, Devontae. No one's buying that. You don't even have to say it. There's no reason to say it. And Tyreek, I mean, you guys know how I feel about Tua. It's not that I don't think he can be successful in the NFL, but what is your success? How is Tua to be measured as success? Because for me, I think a success for Tua Tagovailoa will be probably a long-term backup in the NFL, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't believe he's the franchise quarterback. I don't believe that he's the guy, even with all of the excessiveness at the tools position, or just at the tools that he has at his disposal in this offense with Hill and Waddle and Gesicki and now who they've got in the running back in the backfield as well. But I just don't think he's that guy. So they're in that perpetual state of what is going to be success for Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know. I think for me it's that he'll be in the league for a long time, but not as a starter. So I don't. And everybody knows that, right? I mean, everybody sort of thinks that. If they don't think that, and again, outside of the ecosystem and the echo chamber of Miami Dolphins fans, I think the reality with him is he's kind of in a no-win situation because it's basically for them, if they don't make a deep playoff run this year, they're moving on. They got 2 first-round picks, Bruce. It feels like a lame duck quarterback, like a guy that almost regardless of how he plays this year will probably be replaced like the Browns just replaced Baker Mayfield. So when that elite quarterback becomes available, they will dump Tua quicker than he knows, quicker than any move in his career up to this point has been in terms of a team just moving on, and they do it quickly. It's a business, Bruce. So I think I don't. It's just it's training camp season, it's OTA season, so the sensationalism of it gets hyped up, but it's just absurd to. And it's borderline like are these guys that sensitive? Like having Tua come out and say what he said to the media about oh, did you see that one? And Tua, man, you're coming off real insecure, dude. You're coming off real insecure.
Which is I think, interesting because it's a very different Tua than we saw last year during the Deshaun Watson rumors with Miami. Mind you, I think Tua handled that situation extremely well.
Agreed.
I mean, just extremely well. And it depends on who you ask. It depends on who you ask and what the person you're asking wants to see out of their quarterbacks, out of their players. Because some people will say Tua's loosening up. He's having a little bit of fun with the media. He's self-assured. He's snapping back at his critics. He's not going to take any crap anymore. And then other people would say something like, he feels like maybe he's a little sensitive. So the fact of the matter is, it's not going to matter.
No, none of it
plays
matters.
well, and it's not going to matter if he plays poorly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in the eye of the beholder. Whatever you thought of Tua before his comments was just reinforced by whatever he said. And it's one of the things that we do really poorly as sports commentators. And that is, we're not ideologues. What we are is, we're people who just constantly want to confirm our priors. That's it.
Right.
We don't believe in things. So we don't believe in a concept. And that concept, if done by Josh Allen, is right. And if done by someone else, is also right. Because we don't do that. We just confirm our priors. If my guy says it, it's awesome. If your guy says it, it's garbage. Because we're all hypocrites.
We are all hypocrites.
The one thing that absolutely bothers the crap out of me is that we don't have ideologues anymore. We don't act like ideologues because we don't believe in things anymore. We don't believe in concepts that are just true across the board or wrong across the board. So if we want that behavior out of Tua, but then we don't want that behavior out of someone like Justin Herbert, right? Then we're hypocrites. Now, Justin Herbert, of course, he's one of the most boring people, right, in the entire NFL. He's just fantastic when it comes to playing quarterback. He's a really, really good quarterback. Now, if you ask him about certain things that strike his interest, he'll light up like the 4th of July. But has he ever said anything that got quoted and from the front page of anything? He's just not a super quotable guy. And some people like their quarterbacks that way. And if you like your quarterbacks that way, then like the way that Tua handled Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
If you don't like your quarterbacks that way, then like the way that Tua handled this one. When Josh Allen's feeling swaggerific and he says things like, one New York team.
Right.
Right? We all think that's great. But then if someone else does it, we're all like, oh, look at that guy. Look how arrogant he is. Look at that swagger.
Look.
He doesn't respect the process.
Yeah, right. Right.
He's
Doesn't respect
humble.
the game.
He doesn't respect the game. You know, it's just we're just all hypocrites. And it really bothers me because it starts to show up with the sensationalism this offseason. When someone comes in, like LaShawn McCoy, and says what they said about Josh Allen when he walked in the door, well, then it's fine. It's not sensationalism. It's fine. Even though Josh Allen, the year that LaShawn McCoy said that, was not a very good quarterback.
No, but he had the tools.
He did have the tools.
And when you watch Josh Allen through, and the second, listen, when you watch Josh Allen throw in his first training camp when that was open to the public, which I did, Bruce, I know why Shady McCoy said what he said. He watched, I mean, he probably saw that thing spin off his hand like he hadn't seen. And it turned out that he has one of the best arms in the league, if not in the league. So maybe, but like I guess I'm more with it. The two guys that were named in this both would not be considered tool guys, right? Carr's not a tools guy. No. Either is Tua. So if you're gonna say these things, if you're gonna sensationalize it, like you're gonna sensationalize guys like Mahomes who could do freakish things that deserve that attention and that all of the talk about it. When you're trying to hype up something, what it reminds me of is it's trying to like, ooh, here's this almond butter instead of this peanut butter. Like, what are you doing? Like
Davante Adams wasn't hyping up tools. He was hyping up skills.
Oh, give me tomato.
No, they're different. I did an entire podcast on skills not being traits. They're not the same thing because they're talking about. I mean, think about it. Davante Adams has played with Derek Carr before, so he has a frame of reference.
Yeah,
he's talking about skills. Skills are things like ball placement, mechanics, things that can be learned, things that are significant swings from one way to another because they're things that can be learned over time.
But wouldn't you say arm strength and velocity?
Those are traits, not skills.
Arm strength is a trait. Mm-hmm. I would say arm strength is a trait, but velocity would be a skill. You can get more. You can get more velocity on a football.
Barely. You can't. There's no amount of training in the world that will make Tua Josh Allen.
No, but he doesn't have the trait that translates to the skill.
Right, and the trait is arm strength.
So that's why I would say velocity is the skill of it.
Velocity is a manifestation.
Oh, Bruce, I wish you'd have brought this up at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m.
It's not a skill.
Are we fighting about this next week?
Yes, we can. We're gonna do. Okay, before we do that, go back to the April 20. Before we come next week, the April 21st episode of the Bruce Exclusive. April 21st.
Okay.
I talk about skills versus
April
traits.
21st.
Didn't
you have some sort of algorithm with it as well, or equation?
No, I did not this one. And then you're going to want to listen to that one, and then you're going to want to listen to the one for this week, which was, of course, the 9th. Those two podcasts go together, and we draw the line between skills and traits. And basically what we decided, right, and by we, of course I mean me, is that the line between skill and trait is determined by the capacity for improvement. If it has significant capacity for improvement, it's a skill. If it has little to no capacity for improvement, it's a trait. You can't.
Okay, yeah.
Can you grow a little bit taller? Sure. Are you going to grow a lot of it taller? No. Can your arm get a little bit stronger? Sure. Can it get a lot of it stronger? No. Therefore, those are traits. Skill would be something like reading defenses. There's a significant difference.
I love you're a definitions guy, and I appreciate that about you. I've always appreciated that about you, being a definitions guy.
I think it's important to qualify
get the story straight. Get the story straight.
Well, guys, we did it. On a Friday night, we did it. No guest, no problem. Real quick.
I've got one thing.
Go ahead.
I'm going to drop a link real quick in the comment section here on the right-hand side. I am doing something this year for Roswell Park. We are running for the Live for Luca Foundation and for Carly's Club. So I'm playing 18 holes. A group of guys are playing 100 holes from 5 a.m. that spans all the way till it gets dark out. And this is on June 23rd at Wanaka Country Club. Jeremy White, my co-host at WGR for Buffalo Bills pregame, he's doing 100 holes himself, walking. I'm just doing the final leg of our relay team. So I'm excited to do it, and I'm raising money, and there's my link. Any little bit helps, $5, $1, whatever you're willing to give, would really appreciate it. It's near and dear to my heart, being someone who has had and fought cancer. It's something that is near and dear to me, and I do as much as I can for the cause as I work with you, obviously with Roswell Park here, but also the United Cancer Foundation. So I work with a lot of folks to work together on finding a cure and raising money. So any little bit helps, and much appreciated. I'm going to boost this again next week, but I wanted to make sure I sent that link out to folks if they were interested.
All good. We are going to try and talk about Brent's question next week, which is, do you guys worry about the future cap of this team? We'll try and dive into it next week, Brent.
Yeah, I'm into that. I like that question.
If we don't get to it for whatever reason, make sure you hop in next week and ask it again. We're going to try and get into it, okay? So, for those of you who are watching live with us here on a Friday evening, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoyed our time. I hope you didn't miss having a guest. And most importantly, I hope you didn't leave hungry.